Pastor Rob McCoy, a lot to chat with you about. You have had a difficult and a wild couple of weeks here with the death of Charlie Kirk, and you delivered a powerful speech and address at his memorial service on Sunday. I was there. It was amazing. What was it like for you having the weight of so many eyes around the world, not just the nation, watching you make that address?
I got hundreds of texts from people who were well-meaning, wanting to tell me how to do it and what to say, and they have a vision from God or a word, and after a while, I just had to turn it all off. And every time I went to go write something down, it was a total blank. And I got to Matthew chapter 10, verses 18 to 20. Folks can read it at their leisure. Matthew 10, 18 to 20. And a total peace came over me, unlike anything. And this is honest before the Lord, unlike anything I've ever experienced before. It's 61 years on this earth. A total peace came on me. The only thing I wrote down before I stepped up was the quote from the letter Lincoln wrote to Mrs. Bixby, and I even got the quote wrong. The only thing I wrote down I got wrong. Everything else, it was just in the moment, and I had a total peace because I knew I wasn't there by my own merit. The pastors that Charlie ran with in this world, those are the kind of guys you say, man, Lord, I wish you'd made two of them and none of me. They're just remarkable men. And I didn't ask to be put in that position. And yet there I was. And I certainly, it wasn't something that I'm skilled at that they put me there with. But I had a peace about it. And to honor my friend and to be a part of it, it was probably one of the most amazing days of my life.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I've covered a lot of events. I've been to a lot of events like you have. I have never been to anything like that before. The feeling, the experience, the fact that, I mean, obviously honoring Charlie's life, but then looking and seeing the most powerful people in the entire world. And you said this in your address too, that they were about to get up. You preceded them. They were about to get up and speak. You don't see that sort of thing happen. What do you think God is doing in the midst of this horrific event that has shocked so many? It feels like God is moving, does it not?
He is, absolutely. This is a revival. It's an awakening and a revival. I've been telling pastors across the country, especially in the group of churches I belong to, which are called Calvary Chapels, and there's, I don't know, about 1,800 of them worldwide. And they were birthed out of what they call the Jesus movement. And I wasn't around or even a Christian when all that occurred. I'm kind of a second generation Calvary Chapel pastor. Well, they missed this one. Most of the older guys just didn't see it coming. They didn't know how to process Charlie, and a lot of them wouldn't have him come and speak at their church. And some of them didn't do anything the Sunday he was martyred. And I'm thinking to myself, you guys saw this, you saw God move, and now you're missing another great move of God. And because I think Charlie's the most misunderstood missionary in Christendom. His turning point is a secular 501c3. So it's not a Christian organization. And there are folks that are part of Turning Point that are agnostic, maybe atheists. That they don't hold to the. But like Charlie would always say, if we can get folks rowing in the streams of liberty, they're going to come to its source, which is the Lord. And Charlie never hid his Christian faith. And so what appealed to so many young people is Charlie was willing to go where the church wasn't, into the public square to contend for their future, which the church had abdicated their responsibility for a long time ago. They just said, oh, we don't do politics. Politics is dirty. And I covered that in the message. But with Charlie, he saw politics as an on-ramp to a relationship with God. And now the churches are seeing this. Some of them still don't. I mean, they're going to have young people coming to their church who've been moved by Charlie's life, and these pastors aren't saying anything. Like Furtick out in North Carolina, I'm blown away that they said nothing about a modern day martyr, just silent. It doesn't make any sense to me.
You know, it's there's so many things that you just said that I think are so important to unpack, but one thing in thinking about you and your experience and your friendship with Charlie, you know, I was on a plane coming back from Ireland when I heard the news. I was on the internet and my phone started blowing up, and it was the most horrifying news, right? And I think of you. I mean, when you first heard what had happened, here you are, a pastor who has spent a long time helping people behind the pulpit, counseling people. And and I'm sure you've had other moments in life that are difficult, obviously, but how did you handle this? What was the initial thing that went through your heart and your mind when you found out?
So prior to meeting Charlie, actually a little bit, yeah, prior to meeting Charlie, I had been the mayor of the city of Thousand Oaks, and I was mayor pro tem, and then 8 days later I'd be mayor when we had the most horrific event in our city's 50-year history. We had a shooter go into a country western hall and dance hall and killed 12 of our young people. Two of them were from my church. And wounded a slew of others. And then the entire city of Thousand Oaks was encircled by fires. And I'd been a sheriff's chaplain at the time. Now I'm the mayor of the city. I was with every one of the family members when they were notified that their child was one of the victims. So I'd been through something like this. But the disconnect, with the exception of Officer Helis, who had been killed, he was a friend. The disconnect was it wasn't somebody as close to me as it was Charlie. And so the call came in immediately after the shooting from my son, who was right near Charlie. He said, "Dad, please call pastors and pray. Charlie's been shot in the neck." And he had his capacity about him. He wasn't panicking. He was, orchestrating things. And I said, "Okay, son, I will." And I from there on we turned to, and it wouldn't be until about 48 hours later at 3 o'clock in the morning. I woke up. We were in Salt Lake after we had gone to be with Erica and to be there with the staff. I woke up and I just started sobbing for about,
Yeah.
I'd say about an hour and a half. Just a messy cry. My wife woke up, saw me crying, and then after that, it was just, let's get back to it. We got people to care for.
Yeah.
That was rough.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this has been a very rough thing for people. I mean, here you are so close with Charlie, right? So you have that personal relationship. What has been really interesting is people who didn't know him, who feel like they did, and who are mourning and feeling what you were even feeling to a degree, obviously a little deeper since you knew him, a lot deeper. But I've talked to so many people, I didn't know him, but this really hit me. What do you think it was about Charlie and his mission and who he was that has elicited that response in so many people?
If you really take time to dig in, and first of all, let's say you didn't know a lot about him, or you had a preconceived idea and you believed the clips that people have, you know, put together to try to justify their opinion of Charlie, which in context, when you listen to the whole clip, there is no position for what they accuse him of. So people were intrigued. I mean, somebody shot him. And then all of a sudden clips start coming up. More clips of Charlie have been seen than ever before in his entire lifetime. And all of a sudden they start to realize this guy was really sweet. And there's something special about him. He's got that Cheshire kind of impish grin, that smile that he has. He would interact, and then you start to realize he was unbelievably civil. And now they're getting to see a man that they may have had a preconceived idea of or didn't really have an opinion, but now they're moved by it. And they're like, why did they kill him? For others that were really involved and listened to him on a daily basis, he was the most logical voice. And the thing they loved about him is he insisted on telling the truth. And he wouldn't bring anything on his podcast or his radio show that hadn't been confirmed. And you could rely on that. And people love that about Charlie. He wouldn't go out into the nether sphere. He wouldn't attack people just for the sake of ad hominem. He wasn't looking for clickbait. He was somebody who was educating us every day we listened. It wasn't a cult or anything along those lines, which you kind of see with some of the clickbait models. And people came to appreciate that. And then in addition, all the work he's doing, traversing the country, every one of these folks at the university had a connection with him. He was an introvert by nature. So when he'd go out into a crowd, he's pouring himself out and people could tell that. And he was personable. And it was always about relationships with Charlie. And then that just has a ripple effect. And so all of a sudden, every one of these things is connected and everyone is moved. And I could go on and on about that. Even at the highest levels of government, every one of those cabinet members that spoke, they had a personal connection with Charlie in a spiritual way where he had brought the topic up with every one of them. I guarantee you, I have stories, but some I can share and some I can't. Charlie was
Yeah.
the most misunderstood missionary in Christendom.
Well, and I think people are getting more clarity now, right? And they're, as you said, they're discovering the videos. One of the things I will admit to, I connected with him in 2018, and over the years here or there, but it wasn't until getting involved with TPUSA Faith over the last year that I really started to understand what was motivating him, right? The
Yeah.
assumption I think that many had was it was the politics that motivated him. And I've said this a lot this week. That was really my operating assumption. I had him on a podcast in 2019 and I thought, well, this is who he is. It's awesome. Like, I'm all for it, but it's political. And it was an inversion of that. It was the faith that was driving him, as you were saying. And so in coming to understand that, I think people are seeing this clarity now on it. And you mentioned, him going around traversing the country. He also was going around the world. He was in South Korea recently, right before his death. And that is really fascinating. Can you talk a little bit about what it was that brought him out to South Korea?
Yeah. So Charlie loved America. Now he had traveled to Israel, but yet he wanted to remain in the U.S. He did go over to England because they kept saying he was too afraid to come over to debate. He wasn't afraid to go debate at Cambridge and Oxford. He just didn't want to go to London, Stan. I mean, who wants to go to London nowadays? And of course, when he went over there, England's brightest, he just mopped the floor with those petulant brats. It was just unbelievable how they just got eviscerated by his brilliance. And they couldn't have been more rude, and yet he nailed it. So I'm setting the tone that it's just not something he was going to do. And all of a sudden, I had introduced him because I'd been going for, this would have been my third year, to Korea. There's a young lady, her name's Mina Kim. And it's a patriarchal society, and here's you got this woman, this young woman. She's got a father who's a quadriplegic, and she's an only child with a mom and dad, and she's caring for him. She had built an enormous YouTube following because in South Korea they only get traditional media, legacy media, and it's completely biased, very left leaning, and they censor anything right. So she developed a YouTube channel where she would take conservative commentators like Charlie and she'd translate them into Korean, and she built this enormous following. And so she came over on her own dime and participated in Turning Point events. And then one day she shows up at my church. And I don't have a big church, but she shows up and she said, I've been translating you into Korean. You have a kind of a large following in Korea, and I was wondering if you've ever want to go to Korea. And what I wanted to say was, no, I have no interest. What came out was, yeah, sure. And because I'm the same way. I mean, it's a long trip, 14 hours, and so she pushed me on that commitment, and I went over, and it was remarkable what she had done. She had created the equivalent of Turning Point Korea, or Turning Point USA in Korea. It's called Build Up Korea. And she had thousands of young kids coming out. She had churches supporting, and the largest church in the world is Full Gospel Church in Seoul. She's building this thing. Second year is even bigger, and I'm telling Charlie, you got to see this thing. And my son connected with Mina, and she didn't want anything from Turning Point. She just wanted to be like Turning Point. And Charlie was moved by the clips he saw and the work that was happening. And so he said, you know what, I'll go out there. And I go, are you sure, Charlie? He goes, yeah. And sure enough, he did. We get out there, and it's a short deal. And he's gonna, and then it worked out that he was able to drop over to Japan and speak to the Conservative Party there. And he gets to Korea, and I had told him about the pastor in Busan, which is in the southern part of Korea, in South Korea, who has the largest church in Busan, and he's the only church that stayed open during COVID. And he was ex South Korean Special Forces. His wife adores him. His three kids are amazing. You can always tell a man by his kids. You can't fake good kids, and a wife who loves him. And this church is massive. He knows everybody's name. He feeds the congregation every Sunday, a 3-level dining hall where he walks and says hello to the congregants. This community loves him. And then he starts in March when this leftist party takes over. And I don't know if you've been following Korean politics, but the new president is President Lee. He's booted the other guy, and that guy's in jail along with the first lady. It would be the equivalent for Americans to understand, it'd be the equivalent of the previous administration with Joe Biden. And churches, I was facing persecution, where all kinds of things were happening. And had Joe Biden, had Kamala Harris won, and go 2 years into that, that's where South Korea is right now. It is a vicious attack on churches. They've raided churches. They have now put Pastor Son, the pastor of Sagero Church in South Korea, they put him in jail. But we were at the event, and Mina's in trouble because the administration's coming after everyone that's Christian. And so all of her corporate sponsors are pulling out because they're targeting them like we did during DEI. And then Pastor Son is there, and Charlie hears the story, and he hears Mina's story, and he's burdened by it. And he says to Pastor Son, I make no commitment on behalf of my government. I can't do that. But I promise you that if you are put in jail, I will call the Secretary of State, and I'll let him know. And I'll put it on my program. And sure enough, Charlie goes off to Japan. I finish a couple more events in Korea. I land on Monday and my phone's blowing up, and Pastor Son's in prison. And Charlie says, get me all the information. I get him all the charges. I get him everything he needs. He's going to put it on the program. He has it, I think, slotted for Wednesday. And then Charlie was murdered. And so I'm keeping Charlie's promise. I'm pushing it up the food chain. I'm not Charlie Kirk, but I think I've reached the secretary. And I'm going over to Korea. I leave on Thursday. I've gotten it to as many news outlets as I can. I'm gonna preach in Pastor Son's pulpit while he's in prison. I'm gonna care for his family. I'm gonna awaken the church to quit being cowards. If one of us is imprisoned, all of us are imprisoned. And the American church, this is the largest Christian population in Asia, and no word's getting out anywhere. And if they're going to do 15% tariffs for nations, I think South Korea right now needs 300% tariffs. If this is the way they're going to treat their citizens. We lost 36,224 U.S. military personnel to establish that 38th parallel, not so they can raid churches and abuse pastors.
So you're going over. You're gonna continue the work that Charlie had promised, and that is incredible. How long will you be there?
Well, I've got obligations, obviously, but I'm going to go over there. I'll be in the pulpit on the 28th. I'll do his 2 morning services, the evening service. I'm going to meet with the head of the Conservative Party. All 5 million members have been doxxed. The opposition party's coming after him. I'm just going to tell him, I'm going to share some of the stories that Charlie would say about courage, that, look, we're not in charge of the outcome. We're in charge of the obedience. You need to push back. Rights are like muscles. You don't exercise them, you lose them. We've been going through this in California with Governor Mussolini. I'm just going to do my best to encourage him. And I'm going to get the pastors to wake up, because they bought into what the church in America for a season was doing, that God used Charlie to awaken. They were Gnostics. They separated the tainted from the holy, and they said, I don't do politics. Politics is dirty. And even Charlie, mine was the first church Charlie ever preached in. I remember asking him, I said, will you come and speak at our church? He goes, nah, I don't speak in churches. I go, why, Charlie? He goes, churches don't want me. They say I'm too political. I go, whoa. Politics is the highest form of community. It combines morality with sociability. And Jesus gave us the 2 great commandments. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, mind. Love your neighbor as yourself. On these 2 commandments hang the law and the prophets. And it says, pray for the peace of the city in which you dwell. For its peace, you'll have peace. Jeremiah 29. I go, Charlie, we're supposed to be in the public square contending for the sake of our neighbor. We have a constitutional republic designed for the freedom of religion and speech so that we can care for our neighbor. And as John Adams said, only a moral and religious people can govern a republic. We're the sovereign in the nation. We have the responsibility to care for these people, and we've been given a form of government unequaled in the 6,000 years of recorded history. Charlie, this is exactly where you're supposed to be. And the minute he preached, and listen, I've been with him hundreds of times when he's preached. And maybe over 1,000, if you count in coffees and visits to donors and like. I have never seen him nervous except for that Sunday. He had such a reverence for the pulpit and the Word of God. He didn't want to screw it up. But I'm not exaggerating. He hit the ball so far out of the park, it's still sailing. And I remember Pastor Jack Hibbs, who I consider to be the Pope of Protestantism. He's just a wonderful man. He called me and said, Rob, I want you to come and do a Wednesday night. And this was the Wednesday after the Sunday that Charlie had spoke. And when you preach at Jack Hibbs's church, you've arrived. And I go, Jack, you don't want me. He's like, what do you mean? I go, you want this guy, Charlie Kirk. He said, is he, I heard he's kind of political. I go, listen to last Sunday's message. He did, and Jack brought him on Wednesday, and Jack offered him a platform that launched him into the stratosphere of Christendom that some churches still haven't grasped yet. But
wow,
Charlie's amazing.
And as you're saying all this, I'm just listening and I'm thinking, this is the stuff that people don't realize. They don't know the backstory. They don't know the history, right? And they're discovering things about Charlie now. And as you look at where we are now, obviously it's sort of a new world without Charlie now for the movement, for TPUSA, for his family, importantly, for you and his friends. When you look at his legacy and you look at what comes next, what do you think? I mean, there's so many questions, I know, but what are you looking ahead to right now?
Billy, I have such hope for the future. I did a message, and it was a download. I did a message the Sunday after Charlie had been murdered, and it was a real clear picture for me, especially for the future of Turning Point. And I think you're going to appreciate this. Charlie is a modern day Moses, and let me explain. The children of Israel were enslaved in Egypt. There are 3 to 5 million of them estimated. And they had been told by Abraham, they're God's chosen people, but here they are, they're in slavery. They've probably forgotten the one true God. They don't, have a grasp of a lot of things because they've been enslaved. And all of a sudden, this 80-year-old man shows up who is educated in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. He's handsome in word and deed. He knows how to debate. This guy has it all together. And he approaches Pharaoh and says, God says, let my people go. Pharaoh, like all tyrants, says, who's God that I should obey him? They've been immersed in a pagan culture. And all of a sudden, these 10 plagues, which deals with, handles every one of the gods, small g, these pagan gods. And then the Passover, the angel of death, the Passover, all of a sudden, Pharaoh relents and lets them all go. Now, bear with me. It'll make sense. They come out of Egypt. They leave with the wealth of the Egyptians. God drowns the Egyptian army in the waters. There's water every morning, food every morning, everything provided. But here's the kicker. Moses re-educates an entire generation of people who forgot who they were. He says, look, your God is the God of the universe. He created the heavens and the earth. He created you. He created marriage. And he starts to re-educate them. And then he gives them the moral law, first 5 commandments, relation with God, then with each other. He takes them through marital law, civil law, common law. He places this law in the center of the community where 3 to 5 million people live together for 40 years without a police force or a standing army, which is where our founders got their understanding of the republic because they saw Jethro, who told Moses, appoint godly men over thousands, hundreds, fifties, tens, federal, state, county, local. The psalmist would say the Lord is our king, our judge, and our lawgiver. So you have executive, legislative, judicial branch. The number one book they quoted that the founders did was Deuteronomy. And they developed this from the moral law comes civil law, the wise restraints that make men free. And they put it all together. This is Charlie re-educating America, telling these young people who had been enslaved in indoctrination camps of universities across America. They awakened to the realization that this isn't, a pro-slavery white man's thing. This is the freest form of government ever designed on the face of the earth, that only a moral and religious people can govern it. He awakens them to this thing that protects the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, and they love him for it. And then they kill him. And then it takes it. This is where I finish. Joshua chapter 1. This is what gave me great hope. Joshua chapter 1, verses 1 through 3. Now think about this. For 40 years, they were relying on this man who gave them a brand new identity. They'd wake up and they'd see Moses walk, and a pillar of fire would travel with him, and the cloud would follow with him. This man was everything like Charlie is to us. And for 30 days after he's died, they're just lost. And then God says, Moses, my servant, is dead. He says this to Joshua, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now you've served him, and you've appointed the 12 tribes and the 70 others. You take the Ark of the Covenant with the priests, and you're going to cross the Jordan, and you're going to take them into the promised land. Charlie got these kids out of slavery. He brought them out. But now this entire movement of young people that have been, like Joshua was moved by Moses, they're going to take all of these people into the promised land. And here's what the promised land is. It's not heaven. The promised land is a place where these young people, 18 to 30-year-old, they can own property. They can build a home. They can raise a family and have kids, have meaningful employment. But more importantly, they can worship God freely. And this is what the pastors now have to realize. You're the priests. Charlie brought him out of slavery. Now you guys got to step up and do your job. You have truncated the gospel. You've separated your responsibility in the public square. Charlie re-identified these kids. You were living in a moral society. You watched it become immoral, and you're losing an entire generation. He brought them back in. Now take them back in to the place where they can flourish. Start stepping into the public square. Educate them, disciple them. That's what Charlie did, disciple them. He wasn't into making converts. He made disciples. That's a long story, but I hope you like it.
I do like it. And when you get back from South Korea, we want to have you back on. We want to cover that. So anything we can do to elevate and cover what you're doing there, we want to do that at CBN. And I appreciate all of your words today and looking forward to having you back on again really soon.
Thanks, Billy. Bless you, brother.